No one believed she would dare to make that choice, because the land she lived on was ruled by tradition, fear, and unforgiving laws. She was a woman raised to obey, not to question, and the tribe trusted her silence more than her voice. But one night, when the truth slipped out like a whispered sin, everything changed. When the tribe discovered her secret, silence spread like fear across the land, heavier than thunder before a storm. Eyes followed her steps, hearts hardened against her presence, and judgment filled the air without a single word being spoken. She knew there was no turning back now. One decision, made quietly but with a trembling heart, would turn her into a legend or a traitor forever. Love pulled her forward, loyalty dragged her back, and danger waited on both sides. As the frontier, it held its breath, her fate began to rewrite history. She was a young woman shaped by tradition, loyalty, and the heavy weight of tribal honor. Taught since childhood that duty mattered more than desire, every step she took followed rules written long before she was born. And her people expected obedience, not questions, strength, not feelings. She learned when to speak, when to stay silent, and how to hide emotions behind calm eyes. To the tribe, she was perfect, reliable, and predictable, someone who would never break the line drawn for her life. But deep inside, her heart was already drifting toward a forbidden path she could neither name nor escape. In quiet moments, doubt crept in like a shadow, making her wonder if loyalty without choice was truly honor. She felt torn between who she was raised to be and who she was slowly becoming. Each passing day tightened the tension, pulling her closer to a future that promised both freedom and ruin. Beyond the edge of her world, where tribal land met the open frontier, the rancher appeared not as a threat, but as a quiet presence that unsettled everything she believed. He was an outsider, feared and misunderstood by the tribe. Spoken about in warnings and harsh stories, yet when she finally stood near him, she found no cruelty in his eyes. He spoke calmly, listened carefully, and treated her with respect instead of control, which felt unfamiliar and dangerous at the same time. Their meetings began by chance, brief and cautious, filled with guarded words and long silences. But even those moments carried a strange comfort she had never known. Each conversation revealed a man shaped by loneliness rather than violence, someone who had learned survival through patience, not dominance. She sensed the risk in every second she spent near him, knowing discovery would bring severe consequences, yet her feet kept carrying her back. Trust formed slowly, built on shared stories of loss, resilience, and dreams neither had dared to speak aloud before. He never asked her to abandon her people, never demanded loyalty, and never crossed boundaries she had not chosen herself, which made his presence more powerful than force ever could. As days passed, her guarded heart began to open, and emotions she was taught to suppress rose quietly within her chest. She noticed how her fear faded when he spoke, how her thoughts lingered on his words long after she returned home, and how the world felt less heavy in his company. Still, danger followed closely behind those feelings, because every glance carried the weight of betrayal, and every step toward him felt like stepping further away from the life planned for her. Rumors drifted through the frontier like restless wind, and she sensed unseen eyes watching, waiting for proof of wrongdoing. The rancher understood the risk she carried, and his concern for her safety deepened the bond neither could deny. Moments of laughter, mixed with tension, tenderness, blended with restraint, and what started as quiet conversations turned into trust that threatened to change her fate. She struggled each night with guilt, knowing her heart was crossing lines, drawn by tradition, yet she also felt alive in a way she never had before. The frontier itself seemed to react, as if the land recognized the danger of what was forming between them. Storm clouds gathered more often, nights grew longer, and the silence around her felt charged with expectation. Though neither spoke of love, it hovered unspoken between them, fragile and intense, promising hope while warning of destruction. In choosing to continue seeing him, she unknowingly stepped closer to a moment that would demand everything she had. Because emotions once awakened could no longer be buried, and the path ahead would soon force her to decide who she truly was. Tension finally broke when conflict erupted without warning, spreading through the tribe like fire across dry land, and she felt the moment she had feared was no longer distant, but standing directly in front of her. Accusations filled the air, voices rose, and the fragile balance she had been living within collapsed in seconds, leaving her exposed and alone. She was forced to choose, not later, not in silence, but under watchful eyes that demanded an answer. She could no longer delay. Standing with the tribe meant safety, belonging, and familiar ground, yet it also meant losing herself forever, burying her voice, her feelings, and the truth of who she had become. She understood that obedience would keep her alive, but it would turn her heart into something hollow and unrecognizable. Choosing the ranch meant exile, hatred, and possible death. A path filled with danger and uncertainty, where protection was never guaranteed and mercy was rare. Fear tightened around her chest as she realized both choices carried pain, but only one allowed her to remain honest. The weight of tradition pressed against her from every side, reminding her of childhood lessons, shared memories, and the faces of people who raised her. At the same time, the pull toward freedom grew stronger, urging her to step beyond fear and accept the cost of truth. Her silence stretched on, heavy and unbearable, as every second increased the risk of violence erupt. Around her, she felt the eyes of elders judging her worth, warriors waiting for direction, and unseen forces measuring her courage. In that moment, she understood that loyalty demanded sacrifice, but love demanded bravery. Her heart raced as she took a breath. That felt like her last chance to breathe freely. She knew once she spoke, nothing could be undone, and the life she had known would vanish completely. The ground beneath her felt unstable, as if the land itself was waiting to see which path she would choose. She thought of nights spent questioning her place, of quiet strength discovered through honesty, and of the pain that came from living a life chosen by others. Slowly, with shaking resolve, she stepped forward, accepting that survival without truth was a different kind of death. The decision did not bring relief, only clarity, sharp and irreversible. Gasps followed, anger erupted, and shock rippled through the gathering, confirming that her choice had shattered expectations. In the moment it appears. What followed would test her limits beyond imagination, but the choice itself marked the moment she stopped living in fear and began standing in her own strength. Walk away, rippling through the frontier with a force that left nothing untouched. And her decision shocked everyone who heard it spoken aloud. The tribe felt betrayed, not only by her actions but by the courage she displayed in defying expectations that had never been questioned before. Faces once familiar turned cold, voices once protective sharpened with resentment, and the bond she thought unbreakable shattered in an instant. Whispers followed her steps as she moved through the land, some filled with anger, others heavy with curiosity. Elders warned of consequences, warriors tightened their resolve, and families pulled closer together, afraid that a choice had disturbed an order meant to keep them safe. Beyond tribal borders, the frontier reacted with equal intensity, spreading her name through camps, towns, and lonely roads, where stories often grew larger than truth. Some called her reckless, others brave, and many could not decide which frightened them more. Doors closed where she once found shelter, and trust became a rare offering as suspicion followed her presence. She felt isolation settle around her, like a second skin, pressing harder with every mile she traveled. The rancher stood beside her, aware that her burden now extended beyond personal loss, touching the fragile balance between two worlds that rarely forgave change. Each sunrise brought uncertainty, as danger lingered in silence rather than confrontation, making every sound feel like a warning. The land itself seemed tense, carrying the weight of unspoken conflict beneath open skies. She sensed that eyes watched from a distance, measuring her resolve, waiting for weakness or regret to surface. Yet despite fear tightening its grip, she did not turn back, understanding that retreat would only confirm the doubts cast upon her. The tribe's anger deepened as days passed, fueled by pride and wounded honor, while the frontier's curiosity sharpened into restless attention. Stories twisted her motives, exaggerating intentions, and predicting outcomes she could not control. She became a symbol rather than a person, her humanity buried beneath opinions shaped by fear of change. Loneliness tested her strength, pressing questions into her thoughts during quiet nights when courage felt fragile. Still, beneath the weight of judgment, a steady resolve took root, reminding her why she chose honesty over comfort. The consequences she faced were harsh and unrelenting, yet they revealed truths long ignored by those who clung to tradition without reflection. Through loss, distance, and whispered threats, she continued forward, knowing that reaction often precedes understanding. The frontier held its breath, uncertain whether her choice would ignite destruction or force reflection. While she walked on, carrying the cost of courage through a land not yet ready to accept it. The moment of reckoning arrived without mercy, when disaster struck the frontier with sudden force, tearing through land and lives alike. And in that chaos, her earlier choice became the difference between loss and survival. Panic spread as danger closed in, leaving no time for pride or hesitation, and she acted without waiting for approval, guided only by instinct and responsibility. She knew the terrain, the people, and the risks better than anyone else, and her decisions led others toward safety when confusion threatened to claim everything. At the same time, the rancher stepped forward with a courage no one expected, placing himself directly in harm's path to protect those who once wished him gone. His actions were steady and selfless, driven not by recognition but by necessity, and they revealed a strength built on character rather than reputation. Together, they moved with purpose, coordinating efforts that saved lives when hope seemed out of reach. As the danger passed and silence returned, the truth stood undeniable in the open air. The tribe watched the outcome with disbelief, as those they had judged became the reason families survived and futures remained intact. Shame replaced anger, and doubt crept into beliefs once held without question. Elders exchanged quiet glances, warriors lowered their guarded stances, and the weight of realization settled heavily among them. They saw that fear had blinded them, turning deference into threat and honesty into betrayal. The frontier, which once whispered her name with suspicion, now spoke it with respect mixed with awe, recognizing that bravery often appears in unexpected forms. The rancher, once dismissed as an outsider, earned acknowledgement through actions that could not be denied or dismissed. For the first time, the tribe faced the truth that they had judged too soon, allowing tradition to silence understanding. Regret lingered as they confronted the cost of mistrust, realizing how close they came to irreversible loss. She stood quietly, amid the aftermath, neither seeking praise nor revenge, aware that validation arrived too late to erase pain. Still, something shifted in the air, subtle but powerful, as rigid lines began to soften. The disaster exposed more than vulnerability. It revealed the consequences of refusing change. In that moment, unity replaced division, not through words but through shared survival. The frontier remembered who stepped forward when it mattered, and stories began to change, shedding fear in favor of truth. Though wounds remained, and forgiveness would take time, understanding had finally begun. Her choice, once condemned, became proof that courage, guided by compassion, could challenge generations of belief. As the land healed slowly, so did the hearts. That learned too late, that judgment without understanding nearly cost them everything. She did not choose rebellion, she chose truth. And that choice became the turning point that changed everything the frontier believed about loyalty and courage. Her actions proved that strength is not born from blind obedience, but from the willingness to stand honest when fear demands silence. The tribe slowly understood that her courage saved more than lives. It saved their future from repeating the same mistakes. The rancher remained by her side, no longer an outsider, but a symbol of trust earned through action rather than words. Though scars remained and forgiveness took time, respect replaced judgment, and understanding began to grow where hatred once lived. Her name was no longer whispered with anger, but spoken with meaning and reflection. As years passed, her story became a lesson shared by firesides and carried across the land. It reminded everyone that real strength is choosing what is right, even when the world turns against you, and that one brave heart can reshape destiny forever.